I am not happy in any way. I'm not happy. I'm very upset, and this isn't hat related. This is baseball related, relating to the reason why these hats are made, because of baseball, because of sports. That's why these hats are made. That's the primary purpose of these hats. And a lot of people are always all about the side patches. How, oh, the side patch is so cool. Which side patch is it? And a lot of people will gawk over certain side patches. And this 1990 Cubs All Star Game side patch is a pretty popular one that people like a lot, which is good. It's not the best Cubs side patch. It's actually it's between the Wrigley Field 100th anniversary and 2016 World Series side patch, actually. But I mean, this is still a good one. It's still good. But I'm here today because of the All Star Game, where today on November 17th, 2022, Rob Manfred gives yet another reason why he needs to either resign or be removed as commissioner of baseball. I mean, this is kind of an accumulation thing. It's not just because the Cubs got slighted and robbed again of hosting an All-Star game, because we haven't hosted since 1990. It's not because of that exactly. It's a reason, but there's more to it, actually. It's the fact that, I mean, recently he was pretty piss poor in his leadership in putting baseball back together when he had the owners and the players not working well with each other, and we had the lockout. Now, granted, somehow, by some miracle, by the miracles of the angels in the outfield, the lockout did not last until June or July, when everyone thought it was going to do that. Was it because of him? No, not really. I don't think so. I don't want to believe. But that was part of it. There's also the fact of, for some reason, we'll get into it later, taking the All-Star Game away from Atlanta, from the Braves in 2021, when, first of all, the Dodgers should have hosted it because they were snubbed in 2020. Sorry, because they were supposed to host in 2020, but because of COVID, it got canceled, so Dodgers should have hosted in 2021, but they selected the Braves, but then he took it away because of the voting laws, which made sense. I'm not going to get into too political about it, but those voting laws were not egregious like everyone thought they were. They weren't. And then went to the Rockies instead. He did nothing to, I'm kind of going backwards in time here. He did nothing to really punish the Astros. All he did was to give him a slap on the wrist. Because if Rob Manfred was a real commissioner, if he was a real man, he would have the balls to actually punish them. Now, I'm not saying go and do it like Judge Kennesaw Mountain Landis did with the 1919 Black Sox scandal in banning players from the game itself. Not that far, but I think that a larger fine than $5 million should have been in effect. Suspending for a season, not a year, because in 2020 we didn't know if we were going to have a season for the coaches, AJ Hinch and the general manager, I forget his name, and because we didn't know if we were going to actually have a season, so that calendar year suspension would not have mattered then. Really? Rob Manfred should have listened to me. He should have called me up and said, Jeffrey, I need help on punishing these Astros. What's a reasonable way to deter them and to send a message? The Astros should have been banned from postseason contention for 2, if not 3 seasons. That's how far I would have gone. They still could have played. It just wouldn't have mattered what the record was, because they cheated. Then you go in 2019, that he had a laissez-faire, kind of a lazy attitude of combating the problem of the foul balls hitting fans in the stands, not putting up more netting. Just kind of like, yeah, the teams will do whatever they want to. We'll put them in a certain range, and then after that, whatever. He didn't give a shit. He didn't give a shit about the fans. Not at all. And we come to this part of Rob Manfred hating the Chicago Cubs because I don't know the selection process for the All-Star game, but I'm going to put it on his shoulders, his narrow-assed shoulders that can barely hold up probably a jug of water. He hates the Cubs. He hates Wrigley Field. He probably hates Chicago too, because we have not had the All-Star game since 1990. Now, he might also hate the Dodgers because the last time that the Dodgers have hosted, 1980. They were selected for 2020, but because of COVID, they got jumped to 2022. Can you guess how many teams were selected, at least, to host an All-Star game in between those times 2 times? About 12. About 12 teams. I'm going to go through the list here. I'm going to look off camera here. Let's see here. We have the Cleveland Indians in 1981, 1997, and then 2019. So there's 3 times actually for them. The White Sox hosted in 83 and 03. Then you have where'd they go? San Francisco Giants in 84 and 07. Minnesota 85 and 2014. Okay, I get it. They got a new stadium. Whoop-de-doo because of snow falling in. Still, it defeats the principle. Then you had Houston in 86 and 04. I don't know if they got a new stadium. Maybe they did. I don't know the exact history. You had Cincinnati in 88 and 14, right? No, 15. The California Angels, and then the Los Angeles Angels in 89, and then 2010. So that's already, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams on top of the other teams that have hosted twice then since 1990 when the Chicago Cubs last hosted, which is an overlap of the Indians even, which of Cleveland, which includes San Diego Padres in 92 and 16, Pittsburgh in 94 and 06, now Texas 95, 24, Phillies 96 and 2026. I'm going to count that one. It's kind of a quasi because that one is selected for 26 because it's the 250th anniversary of America. Kind of a sentimental thing. It's kind of a quasi counting. But then you have Colorado, who was originally selected in 98 and then chosen as an alternative site because of the dumb politics that Manfred had to get involved in 21. Then you had Atlanta, who was selected with Turner Field in 2000, and then originally selected for 21 with their Sun Life or Truist Trust Bank Field, whatever they call it now. I can't keep up with these name changes. And then I think there was and now Seattle was 2001 and 2023, but also including nope, that's it actually. So there have been quite a few teams to have been selected. Teams, not stadiums. Teams have been selected to host the Midsummer Classic. Why is it taking these epic stadiums of history, like Dodger Stadium, which I haven't been to, but it's the 3rd oldest stadium in the league, and then waiting for them 42 years to actually host it, including the time that I'll say 41 just because 21 should have been their year, but they were given 22, which was kind of weird. And then Wrigley, if they get Wrigley Field being the 2nd oldest stadium in baseball, am I being biased here? Yes, when I say that it is a cathedral to baseball. They went through a lot of renovations and they should have been an easy All-Star game back in like 2019, even maybe 2020 as a selection. But I don't understand why Manfred hates the Cubs. Because, like I said, we went through a lot of renovations from 2014 to 2019. It was a massive overhaul from when I was younger, going to Cubs games before 2014. If you look at Wrigley Field now, when you walk down along Addison, you have, or is it Clark? Right out to when you're facing the marquee, the big red sign to the left of it, right there now stands Gallagher Way. A little park area. You have the team store in the vicinity. You have a bar restaurant. You have I think it's like it's either the jewelry store that they had for Jostein's, and then I think they have a few buildings there, include like front office, higher level buildings. It's a nice little park area. And I've said this to plenty of people, plenty of times that I've been to Wrigley that are kind of newer to Wrigley. I'll say, you know where we're standing here in Gallagher Way? About 8 years ago or so, before 2014, this was the Wrigley Field parking lot. It was a parking lot. They made massive renovations to that area outside Wrigleyville. Yes, we had to, say goodbye to Taco Bell, the 7-Eleven, and the original McDonald's, but sacrifices were made. Inside the stadium, the bleachers were expanded. They added the Jumbotron. They added more concourse by the bleachers. It was an epic renovation that you would think that because of what they did in that amount of time to preserve Wrigley Field, because really, Wrigley Field isn't all that structurally sound. I watched a documentary on Marquee Network about renovating Wrigley Field, and it was very, very difficult to preserve the history and to make sure to keep the history and then have it for prosperity's sake, so that it doesn't have the same problem again. Because there were a lot of problems with it structurally, and they had to move the stadium. But this thing was built back in 1914 and then just kind of built upon in a very small configured space that was predetermined by streets around it. You can't really build too much outwards, so what are you going to do? They made it work. But I guess one of the precursors I remember hearing was how when a team gets a new stadium, that's kind of a way of gaslighting or signaling that they're going to host an All-Star game. But then again, you look at places like Texas and Atlanta for the Rangers and the Atlanta Braves. They can barely hold on to a stadium for 30 years. In the time that Wrigley Field has not hosted an All-Star game, both those teams, the Braves and the Rangers, have gone through 2 stadiums. They're on their second stadium now. And I'm seeing through Instagram, through Twitter, through Facebook, all these social media sites, all of the Braves fans bitching and whining about how they got robbed of the 21 All-Star game. I get it. It was unfair. It totally was. I feel for you. But don't say that you deserve 2025. You hold on to a stadium for more than 30 years. Same thing with Texas. Looking at the picture of this fucking shed. It's a shed with a nice retractable roof compared to a cathedral like Wrigley Field. When you guys can hold on to a stadium for more than 30 years, then you can get a second chance on hosting. But until then, you shouldn't have gotten even selected. So, it's really frustrating that Wrigley Field is a classic. Not just for baseball, but in sports in general. If you think about the oldest stadiums in North American sports, and even the world, but let's just go with North America. You think of Wrigley Field, Fenway being the oldest baseball stadium. You think of Wrigley, you think of I think I said Lambeau. You think of Madison Square Garden, Celtics Garden. You think of the old Chicago Stadium that got torn down in, I think it was 94. But there are just, Dodger Stadium is one of them on there. But there are just these iconic stadiums that people take a sporting pilgrimage to because there's so much history there. Old Yankee Stadium, too. I was there. Now, Old Yankee Stadium was kind of eh. I mean, I know that it had history, but maybe it was the parts that we were in by the bleachers that was just kind of concave. So maybe the rest of the stadium was fine, but the one part that we were in for Old Yankee, eh. But with Wrigley, they have been renovating, but we just keep getting shafted for it. It is just utter bullshit. And I really want Rob Manfred to either admit that he hates the Chicago Cubs, Wrigley Field, maybe it's the Ricketts that he hates. I'm kind of there with him. I don't blame him totally for that. But to hate them and then withhold an All-Star game from Wrigley Field? Or maybe he has to admit that he hates Chicago. Or maybe he just walks away, resigns. Plenty of us will welcome that. I will be there as well for the parade when Rob Manfred is walking out of his office with his box full of whatever he has in his office. If he, as a commissioner, getting the boot then, getting his pink slip. This has been an ongoing thing. And I have here as an example how, being a hat collector, I have the 2001 All-Star Game side patch for a Seattle Mariners hat, and then recently for the 2023. This should not be happening so soon. I mean, I don't expect to follow a strict 30-year exactly every team gets its turn every 30 years. It might get a little boring. And I know that there are other teams out there that, aren't really worthy of hosting an All-Star game. Tampa Bay. Oakland. Well, yeah, currently the Oakland Athletics, but maybe it'll be the Las Vegas Athletics by 2025 when the Cubs host the All-Star game. I also recognize that, actually doing the math on this, that if the Cubs are selected in 2025, they will have waited 35 years to host an All-Star game between the two spans. Now, that's not even the second longest. The second longest is Kansas City, Kauffman Stadium, hosting last in 1973 until 2012. And there were 13, 14 teams. Well, if you consider about maybe one or two more hosting. Seattle's still there. Phillies, Pittsburgh is still there. I think Pittsburgh actually hosted 3 times Pittsburgh hosted 3 times between 1973 and 2012. So yeah, and it's just bullshit. Again, I don't expect the 30-year thing to be followed to a T, but you can't make a team really wait more than 30 years like this and have so many other teams host twice or be selected twice. So I need to ramble about this because this is the right way. This is the right opinion. This is the facts. That, looking through all these other comments, there are some people who are asking for Wrigley, which is good. But, then people saying, this Jordan York guy, I'm just looking through, bring it back to Pittsburgh. Fuck no. You've hosted it too many times since. So, I need to make sure that other baseball fans out there know, especially Braves fans, you need to sit down and shut up and let the Cubs host an All-Star game before you do. because you can't hold on to a stadium, because you guys had to move. You guys had a terrible location to begin with. I'm not saying that I agree with the reason to move, but you got a new stadium because you had to relocate out of Atlanta. The Rangers had to get a new stadium because they didn't know how to build a stadium back then because it wasn't air conditioned for the heat of Texas. So they just don't know what they're doing. So when you guys realize you know what you're doing and figure out how to run a stadium and keep one, then you have my permission to host an All-Star game. But until then, you shouldn't have. Atlanta should have been selected for 2021, and the Rangers. And I was kind of surprised that the Mariners were selected for 23 instead of the Rangers, because the Rangers got their pretty gem of a stadium. It's so pretty looking. I mean, the best highlight that they had was they had two highlights. One, maybe three actually. Let me go three. One was when they hosted the World Series as like a neutral site, because the Texas Rangers aren't going to go be in the World Series anytime soon. Rangers are going to host two more All-Star games before the Rangers can get to a World Series, maybe even the postseason. They hosted the World Series in 2020 in the shortened COVID season because it was a newer stadium, neutral site. It worked. Second highlight was when on opening day, when all the mask mandates were out and the vaccine mandates were out, or the vaccine was out, you should have gotten the vaccine anyways. If you didn't, you're dumb and unpatriotic, unless you had a very reasonable note from your doctor that you maybe had like a weakened immune system. The second highlight was the Rangers fans coming out in swarms to kind of be like, we're rebels, we are going to fill out the whole stadium, we're not going to wear masks, we're all unvaccinated, we're going to show the world that we can be in that close-knit area next to each other. And then after that, that was probably the only sold-out game in Globe Life Park Stadium history. And it's only been around for, 2 years? 3 years? So, and then the other highlight, I would say, is probably anytime that Shohei Ohtani comes up to bat and just wrecks any pitcher or bullpen pitcher for the Rangers. So, Rob Manfred, when are you resigning? When are you apologizing for all the shit that you've been causing? When? When is Wrigley Field going to finally host? And I've already seen articles after Texas had been selected as the 24 host location, that from some of the Cubs fan pages, that were a front runner, that were on the short list, as always, for the 25 All-Star game, or whatever All-Star game that we get kicked down the road for, as a bucket would be. Because then, if anyone else gets selected for 25, if the Braves do, this is going to be bullshit. I'm trying to think, even if somehow, if the Oakland Athletics move to Vegas by the 2024 season, I'm sure that they will be selected for the 25 season to host the All-Star game. It'll be utter bullshit. So, this is just my rant about it. I don't expect a whole lot of people to agree with me. I just needed you to know how much bullshit is going on in the MLB. If someone would like to inform me on the actual process of selecting the All-Star Game venue, please let me know. Until then, I will put all the responsibility and blame to Rob Manfred then. Because he's the commissioner. The buck stops with him, essentially. So, it's very frustrating as a baseball fan that we have to keep waiting. And the Cubs are past their prime as a team. That 2016 team, yeah, the 2019 would have been the last time to have to have hosted, really, because the team is blown up now. Now we don't have our good players anymore. Probably going to lose Contreras. So, yeah. Um, you know what? It'll be fine because in this offseason, we're going to sign a few players. We might get Justin Verlander on a veteran deal. He's asking a little bit too much money. But for sure, we're going to get Carlos Carrera. We're going to get probably a good outfielder to help Hap in the outfield. Would we get Jose Abreu? Maybe. I know, well, that one outfielder that I'm thinking of is going to be Aaron Judge, because it's just going to be. It's going to be the shocker of the offseason. So maybe by 2025 it'll be okay. They'll have enough, star power to have a decent team on the field. For Nico Horner will be good by then, for sure. So yeah, I'm rambling at this point. So, and the hat collector myself, I have all these other Cubs hats with the 1990 All-Star Game side patch. It'd be nice to add another one to the collection. Another All-Star Game side patch. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if they're not for Wrigley hosting in 2025 or should have hosted in 2024, and if you're not agreeing with me, then you're just totally wrong. It's not just that you're disagreeing, you're just wrong. So, I'm going to sound like an asshole about this, but it is overdue. Rangers fans don't deserve this. Braves fans don't deserve a 25 bid at all. So, the natural place is the Cubs. I know Fenway hasn't hosted since 1999, but still within a 25-year limit, I would say, to reasonably host another time. So, yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Go Cubs. Go Cubs, go. And, bye, everyone. Hats off to you for watching.